Hello, my name is Clarissa Walker and I am the instructor for Writing 303. This is research slide number 3, the video for research slides number 3, and let's get started. This is a very short session today, very short. It's the last one and the shortest one, and but it's some good stuff in it. MLA citation for this slide presentation is here. These are the concepts that we are talking about today. The key concepts: ecology, rhetorical ecologies, and rhetoric. I want to add really quickly that the quiz that is associated with this slide presentation is also very short. So when you take the quiz and it ends earlier than previous quizzes have, don't think something is wrong. It's just a gift. Merry Christmas. Happy birthday. So yes, it's short, and so is this lesson. So this information this week, this particular lesson, is coming from Jenny Edbauer. Her name is actually Jenny Edbauer Rice now because she's recently married. And the name of this particular publication is Unframing Models of Public Distribution from Rhetorical Situation to Rhetorical Ecologies. And again, all of the MLA citations for everything that we've used in these sessions is in the syllabus. So ecology, it's defined here in our course as a system in nature made of relationships between organisms and all that is in their physical environment. That is very important as we conceptualize rhetoric this week and talk about relationships and how rhetoric is affected and how it affects other people and how it affects non-humans and humans and how it is affected and changed. And we've been talking like this and about this all semester. So Edbauer Rice talks about rhetorical ecologies. I think she coined that word, if I'm not mistaken, but basically it's talking about the rhetoricity of images, speeches, and objects as moving, again, personified, and making sure that, one, we don't see rhetoric as stable and stagnant, as sitting still and contained. So when you observe that speech at the Women's March, you don't sit and think that the words hang in the air over the speaker and they sit there, but you think about them in terms of the rhetoricity and the lasting impact of those words, right? So it will affect the immediate audience. It will affect the crowd that watches it 10 years from now on the YouTube channel. It will affect the audience who listens as the 10th grader copies or changes or appropriates what they heard from the YouTube channel, and so on and so on. So it's talking about the rhetoricity of images, speeches, and objects that move, not stable and not stagnant, but constantly moving, having an impact and being impacted. And also to consider rhetoric as objects moving through, or images and speeches moving through spaces that have their own historical context. And when I said that the rhetoric will be impacted and influenced, as we saw in last week or the last session of slides, of research slides, how greatly impacted the Obama Hope image was impacted by the various organizations with their unique histories and their own agendas and platforms. Those environments or ecologies consumed the rhetoric and produced a new thing. And that's what we're talking about here, how things can be appropriated and altered in this movement and in this conceptualization of rhetoric. Rhetorical ecologies. The problem is the way that we conceptualize the operation of rhetoric is too limiting. The models all assume a homeostatic relationship between rhetoric and its environment. So Edbauer Rice is suggesting to us to consider how we have been people who typically go and listen to a speech in the women's at the Women's March in DC. The speech begins at 1 o'clock and the speech ends at 1:30. And we think that the influence of those words, of that rhetoric, is 30 minutes long. It begins at 1, it's over, it's dead at 1:30. These scholars, including Ed Bauer Rice, are explaining to us that the rhetoricity or the rhetorical life of that speech is much bigger than the life of the speaker. Beyond the life of the speaker, that speech, having been recorded, having been remembered, will continue to infect and have an impact on the rhetorical ecologies that it enters into. Again, public rhetoric circulate within the ecology of effects, enactments, and events. Movement, it's about public rhetoric being a thing that moves. And the way that it moves is, how does it move? It doesn't have a car, but it moves in the way that it encounters and collides, how it's interpreted and becomes a new thing, how events are created around it. When we talk about the 13th documentary by Ava DuVernay, we're talking about something that has been, the rhetoric of the 13th Amendment has been consumed and a new thing has been created so many years later. Speaking of 13th, so we're going to end here with Ed Bauer's definition. Rhetoric as a conglomeration or collection of elements. Rhetoric is an artifact itself and all of the lives it touches and its environments. So it's an all-consuming thing. I think the most important thing to remember is that rhetoric is not the isolated speech. It's not the isolated image, but understand that the rhetorical life of a thing, or the rhetorical life of whatever the artifact is that you're considering, is much bigger than we had conceptualized previously. Also, when it comes to the public or a public of an artifact, we have to consider the histories that are within that public and within that environment that influence, alter, and change, creating new enactments and birthing a whole new thing. Thank you. That's all. I promised you it was short.